Hello and welcome. We are here at the Post-Roe America Conference 2023 for the Institute for Faith and Freedom. My name is Grace Riley, and today I am joined by Clark Forsyth. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Grace. Good to be with you.
Yeah, so Clark Forsyth serves as senior counsel at Americans United for Life and is author of Abuse of Discretion, The Inside Story of Roe v. Wade, as well as a variety of other books. We have two on display here that you can check out. He is also a prolific writer on pro-life policy issues. He has testified before Congress and state legislators and has written for a variety of publications. So we're so happy that you were able to join us and that you were able to speak at the conference here at Grove City.
Well, I'm honored to be invited back to Grove City, and I'm grateful to Paul Kengor for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to start, today at the conference you spoke about how Roe happened and the history behind that. Can you break that down in a shorter sense for folks who are listening here?
Well, cases began in the late 1960s and early 1970s and got up to the Supreme Court in 1971 and were argued twice. So there were two rounds of arguments. My book, Abuse of Discretion, basically talks about the 2 years of deliberations in 71 and 72 before the decisions Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton, Roe versus Wade from Texas, Doe versus Bolton from Georgia, were decided and released by the Supreme Court in January 73. But my book, Abuse of Discretion, looks at the personal papers of 8 of the 9 justices who voted in Roe versus Wade, and those papers really tell a different history, a much more, shall we say, controversial history behind the scenes, and how the opinion took about 2 years to write, a year and a half to write, and went through many different revisions with the justices kind of lobbying and jockeying behind the scenes as to how this thing was going to come out.
Yeah, and that's really, really interesting and obviously not surprising at all, with it being so controversial as it's continued to be and still is now. So just looking at that, what are some of the major catalysts that then led to the decision, and then how did the vacancies on the court also impact it?
Well, originally, the 9 justices, with Justices Harlan and Black, decided to hear the cases in April of 71, not to address the abortion issue, but to address a kind of state-federal jurisdictional question that wouldn't need any record or any evidence or any trial about abortion, its risks, implications. But then Black and Harlan abruptly retired in September of 71 due to ill health. That reduced the number of justices to 7. It flipped the balance of the court, and it created a temporary majority for 15 to 17 weeks of 4 justices who wanted to strike away the contraception laws and then strike down and sweep away the abortion laws. And those justices voted in December to strike or sweep away the abortion laws, and then through a series of incredible events, basically worked for another 13 months to explain why they were doing what they were doing. Mm-hmm. 2 new justices joined the court, named by President Nixon, Justices Powell and Rehnquist, and that court finally decided 7-2 to approve Roe v. Wade. The vote 7-2 is coincidentally the same as the vote for Dred Scott, 7-2.
Yeah, very interesting. And looking at that, 1973, and flashing forward to 2022, the Dobbs decision obviously was a big one in impacting this. And one of the things that I've noticed is the way that the reactions that have come from both sides, and how both sides, for example, people that are on the pro-choice side, reacting very emotionally, saying, now women's rights are at risk, and now no one in any state can get an abortion. Just kind of reactionary arguments meant to encourage people to their side, but in my opinion, having the opposite effect and not always being factual. So with this, there was a lot of confusion just among the common man, I'd say, about what the Dobbs decision really meant, what that meant for state laws. Can you break this down a little of what that actually meant for state laws and kind of the ways that people went wrong there in their interpretation?
Supreme Court decisions are often very complicated, and we have grown to kind of depend upon the media to kind of distill the decision in 30 seconds and kind of report its meaning. But it took years for the Roe v. Wade decision to really be understood because it was vague and ambiguous and convoluted and complicated and very long. Dobbs essentially overturned the federal constitutional right to abortion and said, we don't have any constitutional authority. Nowhere in the Constitution is the word abortion mentioned, or unborn child, or pregnancy. And nothing in the 14th Amendment creates a right to abortion. The court should never have issued Roe v. Wade, and we therefore obey the rule of law and the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the states where it was before 1973. So the court, in no uncertain terms, indicated that they were releasing their control of the abortion issue and sending it back to the 50 states. And that meant that the law, if there was an abortion law on the books at the time in the state, it might be enforced. And if there was no law on the books, the legislature would have to pass a new one and a governor would have to sign it. But it's now it's now up to who's governor, who's in the legislature, who's on the state courts, and who we elect at the state level is more important than ever on the issue of abortion.
Yes, and in large part, it did go back into the hands of the people in that way, which was obviously a really great thing. And yes, there definitely was a lot of, I think, confusion because with such a long decision like that, trying to just look to the media or to activists for the answer of what a decision means doesn't always lead you to the correct interpretation.
No. Again, it may take years to kind of understand, but the Dobbs decision by Justice Alito, the opinion by Justice Alito, was very well written, very clear, very specific, very express, that they are overturning Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey completely. There is no federal constitutional right to abortion. The issue is returned to the people and their elected representatives at the state level, and they said that many times. And the courts, the federal courts and the state courts have recognized that and obeyed it. So when cases were brought to block state law, abortion laws in the federal courts, after Dobbs, the federal courts dismissed them and lifted injunctions and said this is a state issue. It's up to what the legislature and the governor now does.
Yeah, and that really is a great thing, and that it happened. I was in D.C. For the hearing, at least in December of 2021, so that was really, really amazing to see and be a part of. And watching all of this unfold has been really incredible. So just before we close, where can people find your books and more of your work?
Well, thank you. First, they can go to aul.org and see our work at Americans United for Life, where I've served as an attorney for 38 years. And Politics for the Greatest Good was published by InterVarsity Press in 2009. And an e-copy is, I presume, available at Amazon. And Abuse of Discretion is the inside story of Roe versus Wade is also available on Amazon.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks. It's good to be with you, Grace.
All right.
For more information on the Institute for Faith and Freedom, visit faithandfreedom.com.